Die Freibrenner, der Podcast für Destillateure und Destillatinteressierte mit Stefan Penninger.
Okay, dann Servus und herzlich willkommen zur 11. Freibrenner-Folge. Ich bin heute im wunderschönen Bamberg in der Stadt des Weltkulturerbes und Bamberg ist für uns Schnapsbrenner ganz, ganz wichtig, weil in Bamberg ist die Weyermann Mälzerei und Malz ist ja der wichtigste Bestandteil für die Whisky-Produktion. Und in Bamberg gibt es auch noch die wunderschöne Begebenheit, dass sich die Familie Weyermann und die Mälzerei Weyermann einen großen Experten, eine große Expertin zum Thema Whisky reingeholt hat, um den, sag ich mal, Bedarf an Forschungs- und Lehrbrennereien für ihre eigene Mälzerei zu haben. Und das ist Denise Jones. Hello and welcome.
Thank you.
Und I think it's better if we switch to the English podcast now. So, also wir machen diesen Podcast jetzt auf Englisch. Ganz einfach, weil es für die Denise besser ist und naja, weil es auch mal was ist, was wir ausprobieren wollten. I had a talk about spirits in Germany at the Chaos Communication Congress in Leipzig with the hackers and the IT guys and so on and so forth. And we had this talk in English. And it was about German distilling laws. Mm-hmm. And so we had a lot of complaints online by people that were saying, okay, why do you hold a talk about German laws if it's in English, or why do you do that in English? And of course I was super nervous. I was super freaked out. There were 600, 700 people in the audience and I haven't talked in English to such an audience at that time, so I wasn't at my very best.
Oh, I think you speak perfect English.
Thank you. All right, yes, we're here to talk about American spirits and American whiskies in particular. But I always want to start these podcasts with the introduction of the person that I'm speaking to. So, Denise, welcome again, and would you please be so kind to tell us a bit about you, how you came to work here in Bamberg with Weyermann, for Weyermann, in distilling whiskies and distilling spirits here in Germany. What's your background?
My background, I'm a brewmaster. I've been a brewmaster for just short of 25 years. I started my career in California and Northern Nevada as well, and I have brewed craft beer most all my career. Mm-hmm. I've been lucky enough to have situations as a brewmaster to be able to purchase some of the finest grains from around the world. And of course, about 20 years ago, Weyermann finally came to the west coast of the United States, and I was their first craft brew customer on the west coast of the United States. So I've known the Weyermanns for 19 years or better. Use their products for longer, and no convincing on my part about the quality of the Weyermann malt, the flavor that you get, the extraction that you get, and you can't beat it. It might be a little bit more money, but it's darn worth it, and I've always been a huge fan of it. Not to say that I don't brew beers with other classic malts from different countries, but I've always favored Weyermann, especially if I'm trying to find a specific flavor or a method to interpret to definition of a beer. Mm-hmm. I really enjoy Weyermann malts. As years went by, I worked for a brewery that also had a distillery. It wasn't attached to the brewery. It was a separate business, but I provided all the whiskey wash, American malt whiskey wash for this particular distillery. Excuse me. And as the years went by, 8 or 9 years, I started to develop a better wash program. Changed the yeast strain. I didn't really practice making wash like a whiskey maker. I practiced it more like a brewmaster would. A little cooler fermentation temperatures, a cleaner yeast strain. I also would drop the yeast out. I'd ferment it and drop the yeast out, cold condition it. I wouldn't necessarily filter it, but I'd then take it to the still, off-site, different location. We'd have to transfer it in a big truck, take it to the still. And whereas it took a little bit more effort to heat it up and get it going, the final result was really quite nice. And we were starting to improve upon some of the definition and character as far as the malt compositions. We were using some Cara Aroma, we were using some chocolate malts and things like that. And so, and the intrigue of the spirit started to get much more defined, and you could tell that there was something better going on each time we would aggress in developing the recipe. So over those years, able to distill a little bit. It wasn't my primary job. I was the brewmaster, but I would go up and we would talk about barrels and taste barrels. And for the past 16 or 17 years now, I've also been a international beer judge. And so being able to define some character and flavor and be able to actually articulate it kind of helped define the barrel character and the proofing knowledge and all these things that you would want to know in a distilling fashion from that distillery itself. As a brewmaster, learning about barrels, not only for barrel work for beer, but for barrel work for spirits. I lived right in the middle of wine country, so it was very easy to get a lot of fascinating barrels to switch over from different... if you wanted Chardonnay barrels, they were there. If you wanted red wine barrels, they were there. There was anything that you wanted for the most part. Bringing in old bourbon barrels, ex-bourbon barrels, that was fairly common. It was easier to do if you were on the eastern part of the United States, but there eventually were enough brewers that were interested in these types of barrels where they started to flow our way in a larger fashion. So finding some of those barrels kind of helped shape some of the whiskeys that we were working on too. And we would do a barrel back trade. I would work with it as a fresh ex-bourbon, and then after I was done with it, I would trade it back. I know that Jim Murray has a lot of trouble with a lot of the beer-natured whiskeys that have, put a whiskey in a beer barrel. And I think that where he gets that from is there's a lot of breweries that put a lot of hops in beers.
Yeah.
And a lot of the breweries that do use a lot of hops or use a lot of funky characters, whether it be lactic, whether it be Brettanomyces, that doesn't necessarily always translate well to the spirit. And so I understand his purist's attitude toward this, but also I feel sorry for the barrel because those barrels should be used up to 80 years if they're treated right and conditioned well and kept full of good things. So we worked them back and forth. And some of those initial beers, obviously, I made hoppy beers. I lived in California. I had a reputation for making extremely hoppy beers, but I also made dark beers, and I also would make, our main beer was a 8% Scotch ale.
Okay.
So it was really easy to barrel age those things and with a clean yeast strain and then bring them back to the distillery. It matched up quite well. So a lot of the time there was really not a skip in between barrel use. They'd go back and forth. So some of these barrels would have beer in them for a year and then they'd go back to the distillery. And some of them would be filled with distillate that had already been in American white oak. Some of it had already been in French oak. Some of it had been in wine barrels. Some of them, it was the final frontier. It was, this is the last hurrah before we start to release it. So barrel work was kind of fun. Tasting these things as they developed was, an education in itself. And watching the base spirit of this distillery begin to develop into something else. And then since leaving that brewery and distillery, seeing them win awards for those particular efforts is really quite nice and very endearing. So. So background of that, as I came to from the United States to Germany, I actually had been bouncing around and doing some consulting work with a brewer friend of mine who needed some help. And when the consultancy was done, I came to Germany on a kind of a culture trip with some other brewers, female brewers from the United States, and we came over to Weyermann. It was just as the fan shop here a couple of years ago had opened, and Thomas came over and met us and said hello. And later that night, after many beers in the beer stubble, I get this Facebook Messenger message from Sabina Weyermann asking me if I would like to be their master distiller and move to Germany. And I thought, I'm going to put that phone down and look in the morning because I'm not quite sure if I'm too drunk for this or not. And so the next morning, the words were the same, and I just kind of felt if you say no, you'll regret it for the rest of your life. So I said yes, and 18 days later, I was standing in Germany and working for the Weyermanns. So it was a snap decision. It was instant, but it was something that I knew I couldn't say no to, and I knew I would never regret.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
How the word turns out.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you have a background in the brewing, and of course brewing is at least half of the work and half of the flavor giving processes and so on and so forth. What kind of beers or what kind of washes and mashes did you do? Were it straight pure malt or a pure or already something with corn or with other grains, strands?
Well, at where I distilled for Brendan Moylan at Moylan's Distillery, we did all malt, basically barley. A lot of barley. I would use a little bit of wheat sometimes, some rye sometimes. We didn't really play around too much with spelt because spelt isn't as available as it is now. But we basically stuck to the barley routine with our whiskeys. I know America's much more better known for the bourbon, which is obviously maize, yellow corn, red corn, white corn, any of those types of corn. Blue corn too, any of the flavored corns like that. And our corn in maize in the United States is much sweeter, has a totally different feel to it. The texture is different, the sweetness is different, and the fermentability is kind of different. I know that corn is grown maize is grown in Germany for ethanol production, and there is a lot of that in the United States, but we enjoy a corn on the cob. It's kind of a heritage thing to eat corn in North America, and so it was abundant. It was a natural sugar that you're able to boil up and basically gelatinize the sugars to break everything down. Similar to a high temperature of corn, you have the rice doing the same thing. So any of these grains that you really have to enzymatically break down, a little bit more difficult to use. But in the backwoods, it was easy enough to build a fire and have some sort of bucket, kettle, metal drum or something like that to be able to break these things down. These days, even moonshiners, I've seen them bring a packet of yeast with them or a packet of enzymes with them. So it makes it a little bit easier when you're running from the law, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, you gotta be quick, you gotta be careful. So
that's right.
You shouldn't waste any time when you're being chased by the law.
That's true.
But coming back to the definitions of what are of course the main spirits or the main whiskeys in the US. You mentioned the bourbon with its cousin or stepbrother, the Tennessee whiskey. Then I know about the term American light whiskey. I guess even more known even in the bar scene is of course the rye whiskeys. So what would you think are the main spirits that are native to the US?
Well, obviously bourbon is the one. It's got the deepest roots as far as American craft spirit is concerned. It is our national whiskey, if you will. And it has to be over 50% corn, maize. And usually you need some barley in there for enzymatic breakdown, and sometimes some rye in there is kind of nice spiciness to kind of smooth it out and give it some character. So usually it's those three grains. I've seen combinations of those three grains or combinations of the corn plus just barley. Sometimes there's some integration with some other types of sugar sources. I've seen bananas. I've seen, anything that ferments. But one crazy thing that I had heard of from a friend of mine who runs the American Distilling Institute, Bill Owens, he went and visited a fellow who out in the prairies of the United States was actually collecting prairie grass and was able to get some small fermentability out of prairie grass. So he was making prairie grass whiskey, which is kind of interesting to me.
So does this prairie grass build some small seeds or something, or the grass itself?
It's the grass itself that has just such a small amount of sugar, but since grass grows freely, he was able to. I'm sure it was a lot of work for very little whiskey, but it goes to show you the American ingenuity of what can we ferment, whether it be maple syrup, whether it be honey, whether it be, and I think anyone around the world who figured out fermentation from way back is going to just use what's indigenous to them, and whether it be corn moonshine in the backwoods, adding fruit to it for flavor, or if it's maple syrup, or if it's some honey wine of some sort that you fermented and then take it to the still. As we all know, here in Germany, abundant fruit everywhere. So it's not just corn, it's combinations of some of these things too. So Americans by nature are inventive, and when it came to these bourbons and these whiskeys, a lot of times the barley wasn't quite as high in sugar components. It had a lot more protein to it. So they would augment with some rice sugars or some corn sugars or some other type of sugar. When it started to become a little bit more sophisticated, as you talk about Tennessee style whiskeys, started getting more into the sour mash, where they actually would let some lactic activity go into the mashes themselves. Although some of them were already lactic, they kind of accentuated that aspect of it and then ran it and developed kind of a smoother flavor, a different flavor, has a different acidity level to it. So as it all works out, it seems to feel like a smoother style of whiskey. It has a different flavor. It's not quite as sweet. It takes on more of the barrel character, in my opinion.
I've heard it from a couple of friends of mine who are whiskey distillers here in Germany, that they start to use more and more of your sour malts here for exactly that purpose.
Yeah, the products that Weyermann has put on the market, not only the acidulated malt for the mash, you can use that to adjust your pH to get a proper fermentation in the brewing world or in the whiskey world. And then you can kind of take it to the boil too. If you're boiling it up, if you're not the type that boils it up, you can actually add that, as long as you get a good fermentability. And yeast are pretty adaptable. Certain yeast strains can take a little bit more pH lowering than others can. So that's kind of yeast interdependent, in my opinion. We do have a product in cooperation with Distiller, which is new on the market in the past year, and it's a sour wort extract, and it's 100% stable aseptic product that comes bag and box. And we're experimenting around the globe with this, with some different customers and what we can do with it. Obviously, it can work just like acidulated malt in the pregame when their dry materials are there, but you can also kind of add it toward a secondary effort too. And it has some sweetness to it. It has some acidity to it, and it's easy to kind of incrementally use this in a smaller fashion. So if you're not necessarily going to use a huge bag of grain, acidulated malt, a little goes a long way. You get a 25 kilogram bag, and you might use half a kilogram, maybe, right? Maybe on a big mash. So this sour wort extract really is a little bit easier to use. You can put it in the refrigerator and use it as you need it, and it seems to be a little bit more workable. I'm kind of taking a look at it on the end result. Obviously, some post work in beer, there's a lot of kettle souring and things like that people are using lactic, and the combination of the sour wort and the lactic. If you play your cards right and do everything right, you can use it in the post. I haven't really measured too much success quite yet, but I'm still kind of working on seeing what we can do to get some acidity at the end of a beer on the post in a dry hop fashion, if you will. Takes a little bit of doing and some time and thought, but I think that we'll be able to use that in that fashion too. It does add sweetness though, so that's something that you have to kind of consider with the beer. As far as going further with that into the whiskeys, what I like that sour wort extract with is use it with cocktails. I can make a wonderful cocktail with just a small amount of that, a couple of spoons of that in a nice shaker with a good whiskey or a gin, and give you a nice sweet and sour kind of character to it. It's going to be obviously we sell them in big bags and boxes, but I kind of have a funny feeling that we're going to start selling smaller ones of them because it's really a great cocktail mix.
Okay.
But yes, the sour influence, the sour beers, things are brightened up with acidity. And so when you taste a whiskey, you don't necessarily always think that it has a brighter acidity to it, but you do kind of measure a different pH sometimes when the sour mash kind of enters into the zone. That sweetness isn't there anymore to help protect some of that alcohol, and so it does kind of come off with a little bit more tannic feel to it, a little rougher, a little I don't know. A little more frontiersy, I guess.
Maybe to take one step back, the sour mash procedure. So they try or they do sour or to change the pH value, the acidity of the mash by adding some residue from the distillation or from the mash before.
It depends on who you're talking to.
Okay.
Yeah,
so these are the
I think that there's
fruits
many ways to go about the souring program.
Okay.
Guinness does their own souring program too. They add back kind of a 1% lactic fermentation back to the 99% beer that's Guinness. And so everybody kind of has their own way to acidify their mash. Some might use some extraneous measures. A lot of times people will bring something back in from a commodity that they don't want to throw away. And I think that that's probably the mother of invention most often.
Yeah.
Obviously, the Scottish are famous for it. You don't let anything go to waste, even if it's the tails. You run them back over, and so whereas the Americans aren't quite so endeared with that to run over and grab a lot of phenolic character off of their reuse of any of that. I kind of think that the sourness is much more in tune with what they would do. If you think about it, the southern parts of the United States are warmer typically. Doesn't get as cold in the winter, and so you're going to have warmer temperatures most often. So the sour kind of fell much more carefully into that. And wooden barrels. You can't deny when you're fermenting in wooden barrels, you're going to get some lacto character too. So I think the original fermentations probably were in wood, and now that we have stainless, how are we going to replicate these flavors? So I think that when you first start out, you do these things, and then after the years, they probably graduated into something else. And as they tasted and sensory-wise, they were able to adapt as technology adapted with them. So.
All right, so you told us about that Americans are very, very creative about what style of spirits they want to make, as for example, adding even fruits into their grain mash and so on. So the borders between the different styles, they are more or less fluid than they would maybe be here in Germany.
For sure. There's like anything, anytime you make alcohol, there's going to be rules for the most part. If there wasn't rules, then we wouldn't probably have a society.
Yeah.
You can ask London with their gin craze many years ago. So you have to have some semblance of rules. And so with those rules, taxation typically is the way that you have people keep the rules together and follow them. No one likes taxes, but I think Americans, with our taxation system, there's a little bit more trust. Obviously, paperwork is paperwork. You have to turn in any kind of distillation notes and take your specific gravities. You have to count how much the volumes are. You have to check your alcohols. You have to, show what your distillation losses are. All these things, all are the same for the most part. But it's not something that you're going to find that the authorities are over your shoulder every move you make. Here in Germany, that's the case, especially here in Bavaria, as far as I know. Not that it's a bad thing. It doesn't really bother me that much. We're not a production facility. I could see where it would get into a little bit of a aggravation if you were a production facility. Bonded warehouses, it's not something that they're comfortable with. We're like one of two in this area. So that's something that they're very fussy about. The counting system, we have 3 different stills here at Weyermann, and each one has a different type of permit. So they all have different counting systems. If you want to fill a barrel, you have to have the Zoll here. You have to have your officer here. If you want to move a spirit into a different barrel, you have to have your officer here. If you want to extract anything out of the barrel, you have to have your officer here.
And
it's just one thing after another. If you want to switch from whiskey to beer brand, you have to officially do this and have your officer here to change it over and change it back. If you want to go back to whiskey, if it's fruit season, you have to switch to fruit. So anything that you do, for the most part, at least on one of these permits, you really have to have an active officer with you all the time. I wouldn't say daily, but you have to see him 6, 8, 10 times a year, which can be daunting with scheduling and vacations and things like that. On the other hand, we have a still that if you put in and tell them what you're going to distill in 10 days, they give you permission. You have the hours from this time to this time to be able to do it. That's more reasonable. And then we also have kind of a free still, which is a Geist still, and everything we put into that, we paid for the alcohol going in, so it's just neutral grain spirits. So to me, that kind of offers a lot of fun too. So you can kind of play around on that still a little bit more with some neutral grain spirits. You can do some fruits and beer brand as they come on more of a country still permit where you can just ask for permission. And then with this bonded still, you really have to have a good relationship with your officer. Whereas in the United States, something comes up, then you see your officer. If it's a routine audit, usually those routines don't happen very often. If there's problems, you'll see them. But if there's no problems and you pay your taxes and everything jives, usually you don't see them.
So they just collect the amount of grain that goes in and they compare it with the amount of whiskey that comes out or spirit that comes out. And if this more or less equals out, then they're fine.
Yeah, the same thing happens in the beer industry as well. And we've kind of self-taxed for a long time. We say this is how much grain we've used. This is how much hop material we've used, whether it be in extract or in a whole cone form. Barley the same, whether it be extract or in malt form. And then from there, they have a formula that, okay, this and this. We don't really tax in the United States at all on alcohol gravity. So it could be a 2% beer, it could be a 12% beer, but somehow, some way, it all seems to work out. And as far as that goes, you pay tax the same on 2% that you do on 12%. There's no tiered system as far as taxation with any beer as far as that goes. Other alcohols, there's some taxation differences between cider and different wines and fortified wines. And so there's a whole schedule of events. You talk about rules. Obviously, there's some rules. Obviously, bourbon has rules. Certain whiskeys, 3 years, have rules. A lot of them are compliant with international ideas of what the rules of whiskey are. And then some are especially about labeling and naming and what you can say about something and what you can't say about something. So those are where the sticky things are with the American market. But for the most part, as long as you pay your bond in the beginning and obviously you have 2 different groups that you have to be taxed by. One would be the federal government, where you have to have permitting and a bond and insurance has to be proven. And then your state, wherever you are in your state, each state has a different set of rules subsequent to what the federal rules are. Sometimes they're more strict. Sometimes they're just the same. But they're going to want some tax and they're going to want some permit money and they're going to want at least to have some sort of say in how you label and how you bottle, because you're conducting business in their state. So not just one group for taxation, but 2.
What I wanted to go back as well is about the strictness of the category definition. As we talked about that bourbon has to be at least 50% or 51% of corn. And then if someone starts to use not a grain, like for example you said bananas or so, would there be a huge cry out maybe in the scene or by the state that he or she's not using pure grain? Because here in Germany we have those rules and we have the European rules, and if you add 1 grain of rice in your whiskey mash, then it's not a whiskey mash anymore.
not quite as strict, but yeah, there are some definition guidelines. We have a whiskey that's quite famous right now, and it's kind of like a liqueur whiskey, and it's called Fireball. It's cinnamon whiskey.
Yeah.
So, it's the Wild West again. We it might start out as a regular whiskey, but then it falls into a whiskey category of a flavored whiskey. And so, yes, there are flavored whiskeys. There are, different types of fermentations that you can kind of play around with. It just depends on the category that you think it fits in best. If you're a traditionalist and just want to do a regular style whiskey that is all grain, and this is the market that you're trying to capture, there's many people. I'd say the majority of distillers are out for something that's pretty traditional. There might be a variation on that tradition. In my case, say, I would prefer making New World gin versus London dry style. It's just my preference, right?
Yeah.
And I can survive on making a New World style gin because there's enough craft distillers out there that do it, and there's a market for it, and they're delicious, and so why not? As far as that goes, it's just a different method in how you do it. It's what you name it. It's daily things change with what we call the TTB, the Tax and Trade Bureau. So most of the time, they have some sort of category where your spirit falls into, and what's in a name. You really have to talk to them and let your regional officer take a look at the labeling, make sure that you're in category for it. And they'll turn you down before you make your label. So it's really kind of a cat and mouse game with a lot of people. They're trying to put more on the label than what's allowed, or they need to put more on the label than they have there. So this goes on quite a bit. It's streamlined these days in the United States. Fortunately, it's all computer generated, so you can you don't have to sit in an office. You don't have to mail something in and wait. They've streamlined a lot of these things, and so it makes it a lot easier to get your answer a lot quicker. And America is a little bit more pro-business minded in these senses. And even though it's a governmental entity that's telling you can and can't, and it does take some time because it is a governmental entity. And since craft distilling is on the rise and there's so many people wanting so many things happening so quickly, it does take a little bit of time, but the instantaneous aspect of it, especially if you're in business already and you're making just a subtle change to something, a color change or something, it really can happen quite quickly. And so we, in America, try not to hold back any kind of industrious business or commerce. And that's kind of how we've played that game. And I think that's why the TTB and a lot of the state entities kind of behave as they do. They really want people to know the rules. They hold seminars all the time at the conferences. They're very accessible to tell you, yeah, you can't, no, you can't. And it really just does them good too, because it's more tax money, and the more tax money they bring in, the more people they can hire, and it's just an easier job for them. So it's more of a helpful group. I'm sure that if you're in trouble with them, they're not quite as helpful, but
officials tend to do that.
Yeah, but then, basically they're not going to throw you in jail. They're just going to fine you a little bit, and you're going to, pay a little bit extra for the mistake you made, especially if it's a paperwork error. Now, if you're doing something illegal, there's a lot of, since Prohibition, we've had a lot of rules where if you make it, you can't move it. And so there's a lot of distribution angles that people, and that's the hard part in the United States, is the distribution aspect of it, because some states, with beer and wine, some states you have self-distribution rights. Most every state in the United States has some sort of alcohol distribution system where you can't really do it yourself. It's very rare where you can take a case of your own liquor and take it to a bar and sell it to somebody. It's not quite as easy. So Germany has some positive things too. When you go to say, for example, a whiskey fair or something like that, you can sell bottles of your own whiskey, whereas in the United States, that usually doesn't happen. They don't usually let people actually have open commerce at these types of festivals. Yeah. It's kind of a flip-flop on that.
Is this distribution in the US, is this state owned or state controlled, or
some states own their own distribution and most states don't. And usually it's usually a distribution company is a company that's kind of like a generationally held family company where, because it's such a coveted type of business, and if you're good at it and you have a good distribution model that you've had over the years, the son wants it, the grandson gets it, and so you see generational handing down of these types of companies. But they do have. I'm not going to disrespect the distribution angle of it, because they do perform a great job. I don't want to have to sit in a truck all day in traffic and try and drive to 50 places and deliver heavy things. That's what they do. That's their job. They have to pay extra taxes to have their trucks. Gasoline goes up and down. They have to pay wages. They have to pay insurances. I mean, they do have a business that they have to run. Yet they have a tendency to get a huge cut of your profit. And so some states see that as being inhibitive of small businesses, like a small craft brewery or a small craft winery and distillery as well. And then some states say, no matter what, if it's a box or if it's a case, if it's one case to several 100,000 cases, you can't take it off your dock to take it anywhere else. It has to physically have a bumper touch the warehouse and load it on so it can go to a different distribution warehouse where they distribute it. I would say probably 35 to 45% of the states have some form of this, if not all of that. Some states, because of the 3 tiers, you can make it, and now a lot of states are letting you have tasting rooms so you can sell it on your own premise in a tasting room. There's still some states that don't even allow you to do that. So each state has its own little quirky angles on how they like things done, who can transport it, which companies. There might be 5 or 6 in your state that are able to do this. You have to figure out which one that you can go with. It's a negotiation. Sometimes they want 32 to 35% of your profit angle. That is sometimes it's less, and so that's why it's really difficult for some of these small craft distillers to really, find a state that can work for them. They still do it.
Yeah,
like anybody else.
My follow-up question. I mean, we're hearing so much about the lively craft distilling, craft spirit scene in the US, and there's spilling even more spirits, even getting around here in Europe. But if you have different regulations in different states, and there's surely going to be some hotspots that are developing where craft spirits distillers and craft spirit makers tend to go or tend to start up their businesses there. Do you have any examples where the scene might be most lively at the moment?
Well, there's a lot of distilling going on in Colorado, so you see a lot of Colorado spirits, and they do have some more gentle distribution laws and tasting room angles. California obviously just opened they just legislated to have tasting rooms start to be able to open in California just in the past 3 or 4, 5, 6 months, something like that. So that made them very happy, because a lot of these California distilleries, basically all you could do is depend on income from a distribution angle. And so you start into business with this small margin, tiny margin, and you've got 10 years worth of whiskey sitting around and you're not making a very big margin on it. And so it was really difficult. So people look to export to different states, export to different countries. And sometimes it was easier to, especially with bulk, easier to export than it was to sell in your own state.
I have a friend from a first distillers course in Berlin, Ralf Lösselholz. Ralf, greetings here from the old town, the old country, and he started a fruit distilling company in Indiana, because being from Germany and having worked in the drink business, non-alcoholic drink, but yet the business, and he wanted to start his own distillery, and now he did. He also got his Holstein still now set up, and in Indiana, where he resides, he's got also this maybe a bit difficult laws to work around with. And so he said, hey, Stefan, let's make it like this. I import your spirits because I have a spirit distribution license, but not for my own spirits.
It's true.
So he he can trade with spirits, but he can't sell his own spirits.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that state specifically, they do a lot of distilling in Indiana. They have some of the biggest commodity distillers in the United States that are distilling in Indiana. And basically, those laws that he is fighting protect the big distillers that do the big commodity work. So unfortunately, that's just one state where the big guy is still trying to keep the small guy out of the picture. There are other states, some of the, Tennessee is a state that has some big guys and they have some small guys too that are thriving. So some states actually see a parallel with the success of the craft beer industry, and they want to see if that marked success can carry on into craft distilling. And obviously it does. And coming from California, the wine business has been the perfect model for all of these things for at least most of the craft distillers and most of the craft brewers, even though we don't necessarily always get along, side by side all the time. The California wine groups have been really, really good at maintaining self-distribution because there's so many wineries that are just mom and pop style wineries. And so that really became kind of a model throughout the United States. But most of these states that have some large foothold, whether it be an Anheuser-Busch or a Miller-Coors or some sort of large facility of distillation, whether it be Jack Daniels, whether it be some of these large Indiana groups, they're going to have a little bit more lobbying hold and influence, if you will, money influence on who writes the laws in those states.
Well, that's basically, I guess, the same everywhere. I mean, here in Germany, it's the same. The wine producers, the wine sellers, they have a really good influence, really good lobby work with the ministries, with the secretaries, and so on. And we, as the spirit, I mean, the whole spirit industry in Germany, I guess the newest numbers are we employ 1,900 persons. In the whole of Germany. So
not enough.
Basically nothing.
Yeah, I think there's more brewers than...
There's a lot more brewers, and they have a lot better connections to the ministries and so on. Is there something that you would consider that is actually at the moment a very interesting type of spirits or so that are flushing over from the States, or that are something that our listeners maybe should look into when thinking about American spirits or American whiskeys?
Well, if you want to call it a whiskey, it has to, have 3 years in a barrel. And it has to have some definition to it. But I think that there's going to be a lot of things kind of not being called whiskey that don't have as much time in a barrel that really represent flavors of whiskey.
So mellow spirits.
I'm thinking, like what I would consider barrel-rested spirits. Not necessarily full term, because people get into this business and they need to see some return on their investment, and they can't sometimes wait 3 years. And in the wine business, you have to wait longer. Typically, you've got vines that need to grow. You've got to wait for that. You've got a couple of years in a barrel. Got to wait for that, unless you're just doing all white. And so when you get into the distilling business, you want to make some white liquor to make money right away, but you also want to lay down some liquor too. And so sometimes 3 years is a little bit too much. And as you start to taste these things, we all know that some of the tannins start to develop a little bit earlier, and sometimes at 1 year, and at maybe a year and a half, at 2 years. I've got some pretty good flavor with this. Let's take this out. Let's call it American Spirit. Let's call it Barrel Rested Shine, or whatever you want to call it. Obviously, you have to clear that through whatever section of the taxation labeling that you put that particular product into. And let's just sell it. And that way we can buy more grain and make some more and use the barrel again. And so I think that you're going to see a lot more softer maturation on some spirits that might come over. I think that there's some new technologies as well that with sound waves.
I heard about that.
Yeah, the Cleveland whiskey with the ultrasound. And I also think that being able to manipulate your rickhouse with humidity and mimic 6 to 8 seasons in 1 year versus one season, 4 seasons in a year. So you can have a lot more heat and humidity extraction from your barrels. There's things that we can change in our barrels these days. The barrel makers are quite creative and putting different types of head wood and then barrel wood as well. So you can create different flavors with just short amount of time. We can add flavor beads as far as different types of wood. We can, there's these new product that I just bought. Thomas and I purchased these called the Squirrels. I don't know if you've seen them before. It's kind of a square keg that you put wooden inserts on the sides, and you can get 8 times the wood extraction in a short amount of time. So there's a lot of people out there doing a lot of different things to try and trick Mother Nature, if you will, and more quickly advance flavor to get it out a little bit quicker. Now, they might still take these products to 3 years, but they're going to be intensely tannin, or they're just going to
over matured.
They might be thinner. They might not have the wood sugar extraction that you get. There's nothing more sound than spending time in a barrel, and that's just, you can't fight that. Something just gets better in the barrel as years go by, and you need that time. You need those molecular structures to meld and mold and change and reconfigure and come together. It's like making a pot of chili. You don't eat it the first night. The second day is always better, soups or something like that. So whiskey has a tendency to do that. But you're going to find that there's going to be a lot of distillers that, because they need some money and they need to be a focal product now and not wait to be relevant, that they're going to start putting out some products like this. And moonshine is big.
That's something that I wanted to get back to, the moonshining, because everywhere where alcohol is produced, or maybe not extremely heavily forbidden, like for example in the Islamic world, but everywhere where alcohol is distilled, be it Scotland or Ireland or here on the continent or in the US, or I think the Kiwis, the New Zealanders, are the only ones that are allowed to do legal home distilling for free. Here it is like, what I think the moonshining in Germany is less a type of explicit illegal distilling in illegal distilleries. If I read about moonshining in Germany, it's mostly that farmers that are allowed to distill a lot more than they reported to the authorities.
Well, the initial, moonshine basically was making a distillate in the woods away from the eyes of the authorities and neighbors by moonlight, and that was moonshining. And that was an illegal practice. And so the product that they made was, in fact, called moonshine. So now, even though you might be a legal distiller, there still is a product that you can sell legally called moonshine. And so it's clear malt whiskey. It might have rested similar to a fruit spirit, maybe in a glass balloon or in stainless for a short period of time to come together. They might add some fruit character to it. They might add chocolate. They might do all sorts of different things. Or it could be just a straight white moonshine, cut the way you want it cut the way it could be, a barrel strength or higher, as long as it fits within the practical determination of what style that you're trying to sell. And it's legal as far as what you're naming it and taxing it and what have you. You definitely can market a product called moonshine, and the expectation is it's clear liquor. The expectation is it's going to carry a kick to it. Typically, the smoother the shine, the more often people go back for it too.
And actual illegal moonshine. The thing is, we are licensed distillers. We make legal products.
I wouldn't call you moonshiners, but I would call you people who can manufacture moonshine. Moonshine is actually a product.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The thing is, I don't see the reason why anyone would moonshine, giving the probability to get caught, the amount of money you could make by unlicensed and untaxed alcohol, and the risk you're gonna take, and so on. And I've heard about in the valleys in Austria where it's really rarely that any taxation official comes down. So you go to a Jausenstation somewhere in the mountain and they claim to have actually unlicensed liquor that they sell you under the counter. Did you happen to come across somebody who said, yeah, I'm actually moonshining illegally and here you can try my moonshine? Or is this something that's totally in the underground, or maybe in the bars where someone buys unlicensed liquor and just mixes it?
No, you're not going to find much of that. it might happen. I'm not going to say it doesn't happen, but you're not going to find much of that. As far as individuals making their own hooch at home, there are people that have some small stills or have made their small stills, and they might do a few small side projects. Obviously, the television show kind of has romanticized, this moonshining activity, and there are guys out there that still are back in the woods doing their thing because they need some side money or whatever. It's kind of like a sickness, it gets in their blood, and it's the rush. It's like shoplifting or anything else that people get a rush from doing. A little back history from me, actually, my dad came from Mississippi. And his father was a miller in a small Mississippi town and actually ran shine in a dry county and got thrown on the county farm for 6 months for running shine in a dry county. He wouldn't shine himself. He wasn't the distiller. He was the commodities man.
He wasn't an enabler.
He was the commodities man, and he had 8 children. And so, they would bring their bushels of corn or their flour in to be milled, wheat flour, and he would mill, and he would take 1/8 of that as pay because nobody had any money. And so that 1/8 either was traded, or it was traded for shoes for the kids, or traded for this or for that. So I kind of come by this naturally. It skipped my dad's generation. But I'm what they call legal. I'm kind of a hero in the family because a lot of the Joneses from way back definitely did this on the side. There's old Super 8 film of some of my uncles walking mules around, and they were making beet sugar from sugar beet canes, and they were making their own sugars, and where that sugar went, I don't know. So it happened, and it's part of my heritage. As much as I know of it, it's part of my heritage. On my mom's side, my grandfather was a home brewer during Prohibitionary times, so they both kind of had their wicked outlaw ways to them. But I kind of come by this brewing and distilling kind of naturally, I suppose.
Very cool. Very well. Is there something that you here in Bamberg, having this not training but research distillery and so on? If someone in Germany from our listeners wanted to do some stuff like, let's say, bourbon type spirit or a rye whiskey or so, what could you as the distiller of Weyermann offer them, for example, training, experience, guidance, or so on? I mean, of course, there's your colleagues that go out there and tell them all about the malts and that are the sales people. But I guess you have some kind of consulting function here.
To some degree, yes. Typically, it's customers that come in and ask for help. Weyermann doesn't offer community classes, nor do I offer my personal consulting services out to just anyone. As far as that goes, that's not something that they have me doing. I do a lot of research and development of our own products, and so I have fun. I test some different things out. I work with rye. I work with oak smoked wheat. I work with our Rauch malt. I work with different types of barleys. I've worked with the spelt. I've made a spelt whiskey. So whatever we sell, those 4 main groups of grain that we sell and the variations thereof. I've done 100% floor malted Bohemian dark whiskey, which is kind of nice to have a different type of grain. So as far as the research and development, we're still kind of getting under the skin of what our products can really do. I know Thomas had started over 10 years ago with some smaller projects, and they have a particular whiskey that they had in mind then, and we've kind of continued on with that same, what I call original whiskey. And so I will make that, and so we have some flavor reference of at least that particular whiskey that's been carried on almost 10 years in different types of barrels. So we have kind of a good way of knowing which direction this particular type of whiskey goes. Beyond that, it's been kind of fun for me to play around. I still will maintain, making some of that original whiskey because it's very, very good. And it's I'll tell you what the recipe is. It's totally easy. It's about 92% Rauch malt and 8% Cara aroma. And it's a wonderful blend. It's got enough of that cocoa malty characteristic in it. And it's got enough smoke where it's not overwhelming like a peated character. but it's got enough gentle, mild smoke in it where it carries over through the barrel, and it's quite nice. And especially when the barrel tannins marry with it, it kind of softens it even more. The smoke softens the tannins, the tannins soften the smoke, and they really work hand in hand. So it's a really nice whiskey. Further beyond that, do you want to do 100% of something? Do you want to have just that true grain flavor of that particular grain? Or do you want something that's quite fermentable? Do you want a little bit of spicy rye character in with some barley? Or the 100% oak smoked wheat it's going to be a lighter whiskey, but it's going to have a different kind of a smoke character. That oak character is a little bit more elegant. It's not quite as soft. It's definitely a more forward phenol, but it's never going to be as much of a Scotch barrel. You can take these same types of whiskeys and, okay, what would it taste like if it had a peated character? Well, you buy an Ardbeg barrel, you roll it in after a year or two, and you get some notes of that. And so you can kind of really direct traffic any way you want. The way I describe it is, for a variation, 25% of it is basically fermentation, and how you ferment and what grains you select and yeast selection, water, all of these things. Fermentation is about 25%. I'd say 25% is your distillation management and how you like to distill and how quickly and where your cuts are and what type of refraction and what kind of scrubbing you have, as far as do you have to run it through twice? In Germany, it's not so easy to do that. But in the United States, obviously, we don't get taxed on our single time through with a meter. We can run it through. And as long as we're counting what our losses are and counting what our heads and tails are, we're still within our right to do that. So you'll refine it. You'll have a pot still. You might refine it 2 or 3 times before it's ready to go into a spirit safe like that. You do these things, you move them around, you try and figure out the right thing to do with the right product, and there's no one way to do it right. It's just whatever you have and whatever works for your particular distillery brewery. Some people don't have a brewery at all. It's just a tank that you make mash in. I do that here too. I have the opportunity to use the brewery and have more of a filtered product that has maybe a 5-minute boil, so I can kind of check the gravities and make sure that it can transport itself without any kind of secondary lactic going on or anything like that. But I also throw a bunch of grain in at the right temperature, and I have an hour where I mix and get enzyme conversion, and then I bring the temperature down with an external water jacket, just with water flow, and in goes the yeast, and the bubbles start to happen. So, I can do it an old-fashioned way, too. We also do a lot of work with our malt extracts, and that's one of the projects that I've been here 2.5 years, and I continue to work on are these malt extract whiskeys. We have 6 different wonderful malt extracts, and these they're really easy to make a whiskey with. I don't have to boil it. I don't have to have too much hot water. I just need to get it mixed in with some enough water at fermentation temperature, throw the yeast in, and they go to town.
I guess that's perfect. That's a perfect product for the guys that are starting their Abfindungsbrennereien.
Yes.
For my talk, I translated it. Let's stay with the Abfindungsbrennereien, where you don't need a brewery at all. You take the malt extracts from Weyermann and you practically add water, and then you're good to go. Add the yeast, start the fermentation, and then you're ready to go to make whiskey.
Yeah, and if you think about it, I have a perfectly good tank in my still. I put in the temperature of water that I need. I have a mixer in there.
You could even
pour it in there. I mix it. I ferment it in my still. Once it's done, I turn the still on and start to burn it, and it's all in the same pot. And there's no grain because it's 100% extract. There's not a lot of debris or anything like that to work with. There's a little bit of yeast in there, and that might kind of carry over into some flavor later. The longer you let that whiskey stay in a barrel, that yeast bite will kind of diminish over time. But
of course,
it's a good way to get started, and especially with these guys that have, since the law has changed and they want to be able to maintain their licenses. What do I make? Well, this is a really good way to make some whiskey, and it turns out really good, to be honest with you. I have Pilsner, our Bavarian Pilsner, from our Vienna Red to our Amber to our Rauch to the wheat. I've got all the different variations, the Dunkel. I've got all those variations laid down in wood. I have some of it in German oak and some of it in ex-bourbon. So we can kind of see how it fared in more of an American direction and see how it fared in more of a German direction as well.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
This is something I hadn't thought about. I mean, I know, of course, of malt extracts from the home brewer scene and so on, but that would be a viable option, of course, for the small distillers. That is something new to me.
Yeah, it is. And you know, for a larger distiller too, if they wanted a custom extract, we can do that. And obviously for larger distillers, we can do custom grain blends, but we can do a custom extract. We've had one or two interested customers in that. Or if you yourself wanted to blend two different styles together as far as an extract, you don't have to do anything. You don't have to boil it. You don't have to do anything. All you need to do is make, put it in with some water and mix it together so it's pretty much combined and aqueous, and then add your yeast at that point in time.
And just to compare it in terms of the money, I mean, we are planning medium-sized. For German, by German standards, it's even a bigger still. But if I compare the offers, the distillery is amount of X euros, and the brewery I need to make my wash for the distillery is at least twice as expensive. So if you think about starting an Abfindungsbrennerei and you calculate that you need about 30 to 40,000 euros for your still, you have to think about if you at the brewery, it's gonna cost you at least 100,000 euro up front, no product at all. And if you start with the malt extracts, of course they're more expensive than the regular malt, but you can start right away, no extra equipment.
True.
This is a really, really nice idea.
Yeah, I in fact this afternoon I'm gonna put a extract wash together. We do it because sometimes it's just easier for me right now. I'm kind of waiting to have our permit changed over to beer brand in a week or so. I've got an appointment next week, so I've got a bunch of beer that I want to burn, but I kind of wanted to have enough to fill a barrel. So I've been working on this extract project. This one's just Bavarian Pilsner, and I'm going to put it in a former wine barrel, ex-wine barrel. Why not? Let's just have some fun. I noticed that the Bavarian Pilsner is a little lighter in flavor, and so an aggressive barrel will really take it over 3 years. Some of the other ones can handle it because they have a little bit more malt character to it, but the Bavarian Pilsner is a little bit more fragile. So American oak might be a little bit too aggressive. I think the German oak's probably really aggressive. I would probably try it maybe a year and a half in German, and then maybe put it into neutral or a sweet barrel to kind of shape it later on. But that's just that particular one. You just have to watch a little bit, but all the rest of them seem to be handling whatever wood is thrown their way. So, and all definitely very good definition, great fermentability. I didn't have any trouble with any of them as far as fermentability is concerned, and I didn't really work that hard to get what I got. And I'm getting anywhere from 8 to 10% with my mashes consistently. Once I kind of found a good base recipe, I've been fairly consistent with everything. They don't really fluctuate in their value. As when you get them, we've tested them, and as far as sanitary, aseptic, if you wanted to brew beer with it, obviously you could do that. I wouldn't trust it to not boil it with beer because of water and whatnot. But with the whiskey, it's just not a problem. It ferments just fine. There's not a lot of lactic character. That would be up to the cleanliness of your still or your equipment. So any kind of extraneous other bacterial involvement would be up to your equipment and not necessarily from the Weyermann product. It's really good. I wouldn't hesitate to tell you that it doesn't make good whiskey, but it does. It makes really good whiskey, and I've been pretty fond of some of the characters that have starting to develop out of the barrels. So we're a year. I've been here almost 3 years. So those particular projects will start to pop out sometime October, November, something like that. And it's just for reference. It's just for our customers who already use our products. If they want to consider using our products, we'll be able to take a sample and have them taste. This is made out of these types of extracts with very little effort as far as the distiller is concerned. Yes, they do cost a little bit more money, but in the big scheme of things, you need to get in business and you need to do this, and it's a good way to keep your permit active and in its full force without really having to spend a lot of money.
Denise, you seem to have a perfect job here. We really envy you because, I mean, we distillers, of course we do practically do all the same by trade, but we have this hassle of actually having to sell our products, whereas you are more research driven. You have I in my person envy you for your perfect position here with Weyermann.
Yes, it's a lot of fun. As far as that goes, we do have some products that we sell. We make gin here, and we sell that, and it's been very well received. We also have beer brand, and people enjoy that, whether it be a regular beer brand that's just a grouping of different beers, or whether it be a specific beer brand. We do some Bock beer brands, a Rauch, a Weizen, a Roder, and a Rogen. So individual Bock beer brands, and they have some nice character as well. And we do some fruit spirits as well. We have some trees around Weyermann property here. We have cherries, we have plums, we have pears, we have apples. We have some Quitten.
Quitten brand. That's one of my favorite.
Last year, every year since I've been here, we also have some Hercules hops growing out here. And so we pick our own hops for our hop harvest ale. And whatever's left over, I take to the still. And so I've made some hop schnapps as well. We haven't sold that, but these are just, I can't stand watching something go to waste, right? So let's throw it in the still and see what happens to it. I guess that's more the American in me sometimes. But that doesn't mean that I haven't seen some Germans do this too. I think they don't like to waste anything.
No, that's not something we are particularly fond of. All right, Denise, thanks a lot for your very detailed and very good insights in American spirits and in what you do here in Bamberg for Weyermann, with Weyermann. I guess every one of our listeners is encouraged to come visit you in the visitor center. I mean, Weyermann built a very nice visitor center. You can try out some brews, you can try out some beers and of course spirits. And if you're lucky, then Denise is here, and just give her a knock and maybe say hi from a Freibrenner listener. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Stefan. It's a pleasure.